job first.
For you, Mary.
Yeah.
Why? Why do you even have a school to do a job?
I like to make money. I like my stuff. My kids decide there's no way kids can
You can float them down like mud off you.
Does anyone else want me to do their attendance?
We had, our niece over the other night. She stayed with us. It was nice to meet you.
Hello, everybody online. Sorry, I was a little slow with answering some questions in class.
What do you think the job placement would be like for our class?
So I think that INL is saying they're going to hire a ton of people.
Yeah.
And I think that the people from INL who have been attending the TAC meetings were significantly more excited about the program based on some of the changes we made. They were even trying to have me come out to INL to like go through their glove box training so I could set the glove box up here for you guys. Like I feel like there's a ton more energy right now for the program. And I know that the TAC members who are in positions to hire, Dono Kelly, Eric Papiano, Adam Gott at ATR, are trying to ask their managers to expand how many people they want to hire out of the ESTEC program. Eric was talking to me about wanting to hire about 7 for MFC. I don't know if he'll get to, because some of that is just processing through their HR. So, I mean, I think it looks really favorable. What I don't know is how graduating during a pandemic is going to affect things.
Yeah.
With so much work having gone work from home, I don't know if they've been able to expand as many of the programs at INL that they were planning to last year before all this happened. So there might just be a little bit of slower hiring because of that. So I don't know if any of you guys have looked at Biden's energy plan, but he still plans to be very pro-nuclear. He plans a large contribution to the budget to the Department of Energy, which is what funds INL. So I think if he gets to enact his stated policy towards energy, it's looking still very favorable for nuclear and for the national labs. So I'm positive about your hiring prospects. I do know in general, if you are willing to look outside the local area, you're going to find a lot more jobs that open to coincide with graduation. Whereas I think INL is probably going to be growing a little bit slowly just because of how many older people at INL have most certainly been working from home this whole time, which translates to a lot of the program managers. So not necessarily the facility managers at the reactor, but the program managers who bring in the experiment. They were just older. And so that would be the only thing I think might slow things down a little bit. So if you were willing to look, at a different national lab or Columbia Generating Station, Palo Verde, some of the ones that are here on the West Coast, or further geographically, with the idea that, after you get a few years of experience, if you want to come back to this area, you want to be around family, you have a lot more negotiation power. I think you would increase your chances of getting a job when you want. I still would be very surprised if most, if not all of you guys end up with jobs in the industry. You just might have to wait that 6 to 8 months.
Well, I know you changed the program a lot.
Yeah.
You probably look at that highly just because it was I think it was very coordinated when Mike was here, so.
And a lot of the changes were things I specifically got from the TAC members who are the people who hire you.
Right.
It wasn't like I just went off on a wild hair. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which was one of the things that they said is like, hey, why aren't we coming down to be your examiners? Why aren't we getting to see how the students are doing? So Did you have a question, Jennifer?
It is. How many people from last semester, or the last couple of cohorts, actually?
I only know about the last set of graduates. 3 are at INO, 1 is getting her bachelor's, 1 is at a nuclear power plant on the East Coast, and the other 2 I haven't heard from. So I don't know what they're doing. I don't know that they're not employed. They just haven't answered any of the surveys or gotten back to us.
So, the cohort that I was in when I first started,
Yeah.
I saw a bunch of them when we went on that tour to, I know, so,
That was pretty good.
yeah, they,
How many of them were not white men?
we're not men,
We're not white men.
white men, oh,
Zero.
I mean, if there's very men out there that got hired, your chances are better than that.
there was a couple actually, there's John Isham, and then another one, he was like,
That's profile.
well, you asked it.
No, I was just like, I know that.
Hey, I can say that because I'm not a white man.
That's true. You can't do more than
Some of
So
them
only
don't know
white
that.
people are racist?
Yes,
that. That's exactly what it is.
so, I don't believe in racism.
I do know I just emailed you guys. I don't know how many of you got a chance to look at it. A link to a job fair, a virtual job fair that the NNSA is hosting the 27th. The NNSA is a branch of the Department of Energy, the National Nuclear Security Administration. They run the weapons labs, and they're looking to hire 2,000 people at Oak Ridge and Savannah River
And Georgia?
in Georgia and Tennessee. Oak Ridge is in Tennessee, Savannah River is in,
Tennessee was doing good.
sorry, Savannah, yeah, South Carolina.
Why don't you go back to where you came from?
I don't want to ever go back. I think Tennessee's kind of where I draw the line. I don't even think I want to end up in Texas.
Oak Ridge, like the Oak Ridge area of Tennessee is beautiful. You're very close to the national park. It's a smaller city. You're on a river. It's like Pokey in Idaho Falls, where the primary influencer is the national lab, like the primary employer. So it's all people in the nuclear industry. So, you know, people with technical skills and a job that they really enjoy and challenges them. I've really enjoyed the time that I've visited Oak Ridge. They have a reactor, the HIFER reactor. They're also the former site of the X-10 reactor, which was a graphite reactor, which the United States did some graphite research before Chernobyl, before we decided not to do graphite reactors. So
What kind of avenues do you usually do? Like, you get into a job that you like just needed to get your foot in the door, and then do you still apply online?
I mean, I liked my job and I applied here while I was working it, right?
Yeah.
I would say whatever first job you get, you should plan on it being at least 2 years. Because if you show, hey, I've got 2 years experience, I've been able to work for the same people and excel and move through the little promotion chains I have in 2 years, you're going to have that good job history and you're going to have good references and you're going to be able to take that and really kind of apply to whatever next step you want. If you're under 2 years, sometimes you'll get questions about, well, you only stayed there a year. Are you going to stay here? Are you sure? Then you just don't want to open up those questions if you don't have to, right? Do you have a question, Caden?
I can wait.
I don't mind. I don't think this lecture will take us the whole time, and if we don't get through it all, it's all in the DOE handbook. Caden and Jennifer.
Do you know the manager of the MSC?
Which manager?
I don't know. My
Preferably a hiring manager.
yeah, so my plant manager is like good friends with one of them. I guess, I don't know, I thought they were the only one.
No. So the way it works at MSC, there's facility management, and then there's program management.
I think
Because-
facility.
Because the facilities exist, and that will be the management chain you guys work for as operators, your facility operators. But the program managers are who bring in the money and the experiments and the projects that you're going to do in your facilities. And so they have to work together. the facilities are then broken up into groups based on which programs use them. And so there's their director of research, and then there's the different facility managers, and then there's the different program managers. So their MFC director is like the one guy
Yeah.
who's changed since I worked there. And then there's different facility managers, some of whom I do know, some of whom were operators when I was there and did oversight and are now management. And then in addition to that, there might be some work group managers. So like the instrumentation techs, they're their own group and they might go to any facility. So there's a lot of managers at MFC.
He said he'd be the one that would be hiring me if I went out to him. I don't know.
So there's not a single hiring manager. It would depend on the facility.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I have to ask him.
Mine's also about NFC that, Lee.
Donna O'Kelly.
Yeah, Donna. Anyways, she said that we could still apply for jobs that were Navy youth only. And I did apply out there, and my ex-brother-in-law told me that they would not hire me. Cause he saw, he asked about, my thing going, and they said they will not hire anyone that's not previously.
Yeah, but you can have a question on there, and if you don't hit yes, you're needing it, and that's the end of your.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I put yes on mine to push me through, and he said that, no, they will not hire me, they're not using me.
No, they won't. If it is a position, so because of discrimination laws, they can't say, I'm only going to hire a Navy nuke. So you can apply and, you know, if you don't, if it will be one that's like Navy nuke experience or a degree and you can put your resume in, why not? Like do it. And maybe you'll find somebody who's like, well, I didn't find the Navy candidate. I wanted this hiring round. I'll hire someone else. It can happen. But they're looking for a Navy nuke.
That's what he told me, he's like, yeah, I wouldn't even bother applying for this.
Well, and there's so many Navy nukes who want to end up at the INL that when they put a position out for just a Navy nuke, like the likelihood that they won't find one that works is very low. So if it doesn't cost you anything to put your resume in there, why not? But don't get discouraged when you don't hear back from those positions because they want a Navy nuke. While we're talking all job stuff, do you guys online have a question?
No, I looked up that town in South Carolina after you sent that email though, and it actually looks pretty nice.
Yeah, actually all of the national labs except Pantex. I would not go to Pantex. Nobody wants to live in fucking Amarillo. Amarillo. It's near Amarillo, Texas. It's the worst. It's dirty. It's this awful dry desert. There's terrible heat that just like melts you. It's not pretty. Pantex is a defense board facility, so it's super high stress and super production intensive. You're constantly inspected by the military. You're constantly inspected by NNSA. I have never enjoyed my time there.
Oh, you went there?
I did go there. And then I didn't go back. I don't like Vegas, and I would even go back to the Nevada test site before I would go back to Pantex. Yeah.
Vegas is awesome.
Nevada test site's a distance away from Vegas, isn't it?
Yes, but the hotels you stayed in were Vegas. You took a bus.
You can't live in Mercury?
Usually you couldn't find availability under per diem. So if I wanted to pay my own money to stay there, I could have, but I did not want to do that. So I stayed in Vegas and I took the bus. Yeah, so Jack, I would say pretty much all of the national labs I've been to, the cities surrounding them are pretty great. And if you like bigger cities, Sandia is pretty close to Albuquerque. Most of the labs are near smaller towns like Oak Ridge. And I think that it's free to register for that job fair. So, you know, might as well throw an application out. And if you decide in the end, no, I don't want to move to that place, you can always say no. I think sometimes people are afraid to put an application out that they're not very sure about because they don't want it to reflect poorly on them if they say no to a job offer. And I don't think, in my experience, that has ever been the way hiring people have looked at that process. If you have absolutely no intention of possibly taking that job, sure, don't put your resume out. But if you're even a little bit interested in what they're doing and it aligns with, a possibility, you never know what they might offer you. And if you end up saying no for a reason, you can tell them like, no, I really want to stay here where family is. I'm going to pursue a different job. It doesn't reflect poorly on you. I know people who said no to a job and 5 years later their life changed and they got the same job with the same group of people. So it's not like saying no gives you a bad reputation in the industry or with that hiring person. People make decisions on jobs for a variety of reasons. So I would encourage you guys to apply more rather than less. Okay, let's talk about unsafe attitudes and at-risk behavior. If we don't get through all of this topic, it's fine. It's really straight from the DOE handbook. I'm just highlighting what's important. So, okay, attitude, state of mind or feeling toward an object or subject. Often, your attitude is formulated by your experiences as well as examples and guidelines from others. Sometimes it's through acquired beliefs, which may be the result of educational experience or personal experience in hobbies, previous career experience. Attitude can also be acculturated, which means it's formulated by one's experiences and influence from beliefs and behaviors within one's peer group. In the nuclear industry, there's a standard set that we are going to exist within a safety culture that eliminates at-risk attitudes. We've talked in ConOps pretty extensively about the fact that being required to use a procedure, even for some process you've done multiple times, is not an insult to your competence. It's a statement of how we do work, which is by the procedure and by the steps, right? That's an attitude that probably would not be your initial feeling towards being told to use a procedure, right? If I told you that you have to use a procedure from now on when you brush your teeth in the morning, most of you would feel that that's pretty insulting, right? Like, do I have bad breath? Is that why she's trying to make me change how I brush my teeth, right? And so when we cultivate an attitude that's compatible with a successful safety culture, we have to examine our beliefs and feelings about what we're doing in light of what their research says makes a safe workplace. Anyone can possess an unsafe attitude. Even at times, myself, as someone who's worked in the nuclear industry for a very long time and who very much buys into this philosophy of safety culture, I found myself driving home from one of my rentals that is 3 blocks away from where I was going, and I didn't put my seatbelt on. The majority of accidents, 90% of accidents, happen within 2 miles of home, right? So I know data-wise that choice was an unsafe attitude. I'm only going a little distance. I'm not going to get in a wreck. And I've been driving for, however many decades since I got my license. I have a lot of experience in it. It's not an insult to my driving that I might get in a wreck. Other people can cause them, right? But still, that unsafe attitude overwhelmed the data and the knowledge that wearing the seatbelt is the correct choice, right? That's a pretty easy example because I'm sure almost all of us at some point have not put on our seatbelt when we should. But when you take that and you put it in the nuclear industry, when there's such high consequences for even small mistakes at times, we have to really guard against that complacent, unsafe attitude that can creep in. Unsafe attitudes are derived usually from beliefs and assumptions about workplace hazards. So just a quick definition, hazards are threats of harm. It can include physical damage to your equipment, personal injury, or human error that doesn't actually lead to an event, but a mistake was still made, right? Unsafe attitudes blind us to our precursors. So our error precursors that we talked about, right? When we have an unsafe attitude, a lot of times we won't identify those precursors as being what can lead to harm or cause a hazard, right? We'll be complacent, we'll think it's not that big of a deal. One of the biggest issues that I think happens when individuals allow themselves to embrace unsafe attitudes is I've mentioned before that humans are just really bad at risk analysis, right? Have I told you guys about the education campaign they did with some housewives association on chemical plant hazards and fall hazards? Okay, this is one of my favorite illustrations. So OSHA was trying to educate people who were typically anti the building of new high technology industry, like putting a chemical plant in a town, right? Especially if it was going to be near some sort of neighborhood. And so there was some coalition of like moms against chemicals. I don't remember what it was, but it was something like that, right? And so it was a group of stay-at-home moms who were really worried about having this chemical plant go in near their neighborhood. So OSHA came in and they did this huge education program. They met with the coalition. They explained that based on the hazards, you are more likely to die falling off a ladder at your house than living within 5 miles of a chemical processing plant. And they gave them the data and they showed them examples and they showed the counts from their OSHA accident and they explained the hazards of the chemical plant and the safety precautions. And then they gave them a quiz at the end. And they asked, what's more dangerous, ladders or chemical plants? And I think it was like 86% of the women indicated chemical plants were more dangerous than ladders, despite the evidence that clearly ladders cause more deaths. Now, some of those ladders might be at chemical plants and you could like maybe convolute the data there, but ladders are more dangerous. And so a lot of times our beliefs and assumptions are more powerful than data and facts. And we're going to interpret those data and that data and those facts in light of our beliefs and assumptions. So a very, very intelligent person could have a very, very unsafe attitude. And I will guarantee that you guys will encounter an engineer who thinks they are all that and that they know all that, and they will do something ridiculously stupid in your facility, and they will not listen to you when you tell them not to. I saw it probably almost every day I was at INL. You just get that one engineer who thinks he or she is too good to be told anything and that they're just so smart. And it's because they have these beliefs and assumptions, not because they're incapable of having a safe attitude or being explained why they need to change their attitude. They can understand this information. But if those beliefs and assumptions aren't examined with the idea that you need to be embracing safe attitudes, you're going to have a fundamental disconnect between what you need to do and what you believe you should be doing. I see this a lot when there's a very onerous regulatory process that requires a great deal of paperwork. And if people would just at the onset say, okay, we need to add an extra couple weeks to our program so that we can get this paperwork in order. Our project knows it's going to need to be in the schedule. We're not going to move forward at this milestone until we have this in place. And it's the regulatory precursor work. And people would just jump in and do it and make sure someone on their team knows how. You would not find nearly as many regulatory delays or obstacles to work as we end up finding, because what happens is people try to circumvent it. They say, oh, this is just the paperwork, or nobody knows how to do it. It's a bunch of government bureaucracy and red tape. Let's just try and go forward. And so then they go forward and then they get stopped and then they have to go back and then they have to add time to their project anyway. All of that could be avoided if the unsafe attitude that I don't need to follow this process was examined and removed, right? Does that make sense? Why really smart people who you may respect a lot as a coworker might still be susceptible and why we ourselves might be really good at a lot of things, but every now and then we'll find an unsafe attitude about a particular area. Okay. So, mental bias. This unsafe attitude is where we want to take mental shortcuts. It offers us unconscious methods to create order and simplicity, which reduces mental effort. So, what you're going to see is during troubleshooting, diagnostics during an emergency operation, or problem solving and decision making, sometimes we want to not look at certain input and parameters because they muddy the waters. I think this was a big issue in the recovery after the Chernobyl incident. And those of you who are reading Midnight at Chernobyl, I think that you will clearly see mental bias from the lead supervisor as he continued to demand that water be dumped on the core so it could be maintained cool when there was not a core left, like it had exploded. And so he was not processing all of the input because in his mind, if he focused on keeping water on the reactor, he could contain the emergency. So he, for hours, did not process the information. There's no reactor to keep cool. It's gone. It's exploded. It's distributed through the countryside in molten pieces, right? And so that mental bias of looking for that shortcut so that he could just focus on something that was simple and known to him, I think was a huge contributor why so many more people died from the first responder group, because they were trying to do something that wasn't going to fix the problem. Okay, we're going to go through a list here of unsafe attitudes. These are all listed in the DOE handbook. So I'm just going to pick out a couple and give some examples I've seen in the workplace just to get you guys kind of thinking about them. In the syllabus where it tells you where to do some reading and in the quiz, it goes over these as well. So you'll get, I think that Christy just got it posted, didn't she? Let me check.
All I see is an application exercise.
There is supposed to be a week 2 quiz. It looks like it's not up yet. Week 3 is. So my guess is she'll get that up in the next day. Okay. Share that again. Okay. So, pride, an excessively high opinion of your own ability. Being self-focused, pride will blind us to the value of what others can provide, hindering teamwork. And foolish pride will cause you to think your competence is being called into question when you were corrected about not adhering to expectations. This is a really great attitude to cultivate in yourself from the beginning, that when someone offers you a correction or explains how to do something different, they're not calling your competence into question. They're trying to help you battle human fallibility. So not only should you not feel insecure because you receive a correction or a performance standard is brought to your attention that you didn't meet, you should realize that working together to do that within your whole work group is how you guys as a group are going to combat the fact that you'll all make errors. So you're combating human error, you're not questioning each other's competence. And cultivating that attitude in yourself helps make you better able to receive constructive feedback and improve your performance, so you really do get to remove errors. Does that make sense? Okay. You can usually identify pride when someone responds with something akin to, "Don't tell me what to do." This will be an attitude staple of many engineers and sometimes of managers as well, especially ones that have worked up the ranks. and they used to be an operator, but they haven't been on the floor in a really long time. And they think they know, but they're maybe not aware of the updates and new processes that you guys are using. That's where I tend to see this a lot. Okay, heroic. Heroic reactions are usually impulsive. This is an exaggerated sense of courage and boldness. So the DOE handbooks use the example of General Custer, right? And so he had been very successful and had a lot of military victories. So his scouts and other officers warned him not to engage at Little Bighorn, but he failed to wait for reinforcements. He thought he could do it on his own, and he and all of his men died, right? This perspective is characterized by an extreme focus on the goal without consideration of the hazards to avoid. In the nuclear workplace, I tend to see this when people are trying really hard to get a task done in time and are not paying attention to all the particulars of how it has to be done. You think you're doing the right thing, you're getting that job done, you're getting your work done that you're paid for, right? Which is important, like finishing our work is important, but not at the sacrifice of safety. Fatalistic attitudes. This is a defeatist belief that all events are predetermined and inevitable, and that nothing can be done to avert fate. So I don't know how many of you know anything about Christian theology, but these are the Calvinists. Everything's predetermined. No, okay. So the DOE handbook talks about the trench warfare in World War I, right? Week after week, month after month, year after year, the same failed defensive strategy prevailed. I would see this in two groups of people. One was the older workers who had not kept up as processes and procedures changed. And so they would attempt to do something the old way, and they'd be pulled up short, and they'd be told, no, you have to go back and do this piece of paperwork, and you have to get this approval. And they'd start to have this real defeatist belief that, well, there's no way to get work done here. It's just too much government bureaucracy, too much red tape, too many procedures that aren't necessary in the name of safety that don't actually enhance safety. I would hear that statement a lot. We have all these processes and procedures in the name of safety, but we're not creating any more safety. We're just creating work burdens. And that can absolutely sometimes be true. Sometimes a policy or process is put in place because it's easier for management, not because it actually improves safety. And as operators, 100%, you guys have an opportunity to speak out against that and suggest something else that actually does improve safety and remove unnecessary procedure and burden. But if you believe everything is going to be like that, you're not going to have belief in the processes and procedures that actually do enforce safety, right? So this unsafe attitude translates into not trusting in the error prevention tools that actually work because you think they're all worthless. Invulnerability, this, you believe you're immune to error, failure, or injury. We've already talked about the fact that that's not true. Pollyanna, this is the tendency to presume that all is normal and perfect in your immediate surroundings. This is particularly a dangerous attitude when people perform routine activities unconsciously thinking nothing will go wrong. When you hear people asking, why are we doing this? What could go wrong with this? And they're not actually interested in the answer, they're asking it more rhetorically. This is the Pollyanna attitude. It promotes an inaccurate perception of risk. Most all of you will probably experience a tendency towards this attitude somewhere after your first year of work in the industry. You would have been highly supervised and trained your first probably 8 months. You're going to have a lot of people partnering with you, showing you the ropes, helping you understand what to do so you do it safely and correctly. And then you're going to kind of be let loose on your own. And at first, you're going to be really careful because you're doing stuff on your own. You're making reactor manipulations. You're getting ready to be that professional operator, whether it's in the control room or not. And then a few months of not having someone next to you watching you and having been doing it on your own correctly for a little while, you're going to start to feel comfortable. You're going to start to feel that a lot of the things you're doing are routine and you're used to them. And you're going to kind of struggle to dip into this all is well attitude. And you're not going to persistently question yourself. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? What's this going to cause? What could go wrong? What do I need to make sure is in the right position before I make this change? You're going to kind of drop off that habit. Usually, maybe now that I'm having this talk with you guys, you won't. That's typically what happens right in that first year. So make sure you realize that what we do is high risk and high hazard. We put a lot of really good controls in place, but it's up to you guys to make sure that you keep your attitude questioning. Does that make sense? Okay. Bald tire. A belief that past performance is justification for not changing, improving practices or conditions. They call it the bald tire because I've got 60,000 miles on this set of tires and haven't had a flat yet. Like, obviously that means you're closer to a flat than you were, not keep going for another 60,000 and you won't have a flat tire, right? This is a big one where managers can be tempted to ignore recommendations for improvements if you haven't had something break or go wrong yet. A lot of times you'll see the most significant improvement in safety right after a minor event, because the managers are going to realize they had a close miss and they're going to make a change. But before that, if it wasn't actually causing events, they're not going to tend to. And this was exactly the attitude with the Columbia Space Shuttle. So over the course of 22 years, on every flight, some of that foam covering came off the outer skin of the fuel tank and it would hit the shuttle. But then in 2003, the way it hit the shuttle, it actually damaged part of that heat shield, right? And that's the space shuttle that exploded and killed everyone. So they normalized the accident condition. They didn't do anything about it for 22 years. And then it ended up killing an entire shuttle of personnel. So that's the danger of bald tire. It hasn't done anything bad yet. Doesn't mean it's not a risky scenario. Okay, those are our unsafe attitudes. That's what we think and believe about something. It's going to inform our behavior. At-risk behaviors are actions that involve shortcuts, violations, or actions at the expense of safety. As we've discussed numerous times, people are poor judges of risk. So sometimes what feels safe may in fact be dangerous, and we have boundaries on our behavior in the workplace to ensure that we don't do things we may not realize the risk for. An at-risk practice will involve a move from safety towards danger, or towards a hazard, or towards ignoring an error precursor, right? All these concepts we've talked about in this class. They're going to increase your probability of an accident, okay? This does not mean that every at-risk behavior should not be performed. They may in fact sometimes be necessary, but you do have to know what the at-risk behavior and practice is, what systems it's going to affect, and what circumstances might activate it. Building a nuclear reactor in the very first place is an at-risk behavior, right? We are now creating a hazard from steam explosion, radiation release, all of our normal industrial hazards like falling from ladders, in a place where maybe it was a green field before. Everyone would pretty much say it's worth that risk because we need power, right? So at-risk behaviors can be very necessary and even at sometimes good, but you have to quantify the risk. Operating a pulsed reactor is a larger risk than operating a steady state reactor. We have a pulsed reactor at the INL that exists to create a high neutron density in order to test new fuel designs so that we can try to destroy the fuel in a safe experiment capsule before we put it in a reactor that experiences an accident and we don't know what's going to happen, right? So that risk of designing for a pulse mode was considered worth it to remove risk in putting new fuel in reactors and not knowing what it would do in an accident, right? So at-risk behaviors are not necessarily all bad things. They might be very necessary, but you have to understand you're taking a move from safety towards danger, and you have to quantify that, understand what it's going to do, and have a valid reason to do that for it to be an acceptable at-risk practice. Everyone got that? Okay. I know a lot of the stuff we presented has been bad stuff that we don't want to do, so I just want to make clear, at-risk behavior is not necessarily something we shouldn't do. At-risk behavior that is not quantified and controlled is going to usually involve taking the path of least effort. A lot of times it's not penalized with an event occurring when you take that risk, but it can lead to additional risks being taken or an accident that occurs later because that risk was tolerated. Okay? Here's a list of some of the negative at-risk behaviors that we don't want to engage in. These are ones that there's not a sufficient justification for the departure from safety to continue these at-risk behaviors. And there's, yeah. Can anyone think of an at-risk behavior that we might want to take in a nuclear power plant? Jennifer?
These, out of these that are on here.
No, it would not be one of these. Right? So these are the ones that we're not going to engage in these at-risk behaviors because there's not a justification for taking this risk. But there might be at-risk behaviors where there is a justification. So I'm wondering if you guys can think of an example of one that wouldn't be on this list.
Would maybe scrapping the reactor, we think there's an issue in that behavior?
I don't think scramming the reactor would be at risk because it's designed to be scrammed. If you have a reaction that you don't expect from your reactor, you are in fact told to scram it as an operator. So I wouldn't say scramming it.
Not scrapping. We think there's an issue.
That would definitely be at-risk behavior, but what would be your justification for engaging that at-risk behavior?
Good question.
Do you have one, Jennifer, now that I clarified the question?
Maybe like doing maintenance
Okay.
on something that you might get a little bit higher than you do normally, but it has to be done like while the process is happening.
Yeah. So increasing your allowable administrative dose limit to perform a certain task that has to be performed, and there's no other way to reduce your radiation exposure risk. But if you don't do that repair, you can have some serious issues with the function of the reactor. That would absolutely be an at-risk behavior we engage in at times. Did you raise your hand, Joe?
Testing the limits. You have to run a test. The test is to find out what the limits are.
Yes.
You calculated it, now you have to run a test.
Yeah. Testing our scram drop time, right? We're going to cycle our control rods and we're going to put that pressure of scramming on them, which we talked about in materials, how if we don't use a dash pot, we can actually have some impact damage in our control rods, right? So we're risking that damage, but we have to know that our control rods drop in time, right? So we're going to take that risk and do that test. Online, do you guys have one that you can think of?
I could see like running into a contamination area without PPE on if you saw someone was having like a medical emergency or something like that.
Okay, life-saving activities might be justification for taking on certain risks. Absolutely. And there are actually specific higher dose limits allowed for life-saving activity during an accident for that reason. Okay. The presentation talks a little bit more about the issue with at-risk behavior, right? And so basically, if you're engaging in unacceptable at-risk behavior without correction, those behaviors become automatic, and then it actually becomes a skill-based response. You've done it so many times that now your skill is at risk. So making sure that you look at any at-risk behaviors you might be deciding to engage in, asking yourself what the justification for that is, and then evaluating if your attitude was unsafe that led you to make that behavior choice, or if there's a justification for the risk you just took. Any questions? Okay, it's a lot of definitions and a lot of concepts, so I recommend that you guys look through this review at the end, right? It's got the answers right in there. And it's several slides of that, so take a look at that. Take the quiz that'll hopefully be open today. And let me know if you have any questions. We're gonna do an activity Friday. Applying some unsafe attitudes and at-risk behavior prevention. We're going to design a safety culture campaign to try and prevent people from engaging in one of these. So it'll be kind of fun, get you thinking about what tips and techniques would prevent you from engaging in these and making it applicable to your team. Okay, any questions online? All right, I'm going to end the Zoom then, guys. Any questions?